Anomaly, something different, abnormal, peculiar, or not easily classified, a deviation from the common rule, an irregularity. In the city of Atlanta, Georgia, the emergence of one particular tribe personifies this. All Nations Worship Assembly Atlanta. They are a people great and strong. These are their stories.
We have done in 2 years what is an anomaly within the context of church, and God has been extremely faithful to us, and I don't take it for granted.
The All Nations Worship Assembly was conceptualized the winter of 2003, and we started services officially that June of 2004. And although I was a bit jarred by God's call on my life at that time to do it in that way that soon, what I immediately realized was the homeless nature of every gifted person I knew. And a part of what my primary motivation has been for All Nations is to be able to create an environment and a tapestry where the gifted could feel safe, where the gifted could be loved, and where the gifted could feel led and not used. And so part of what has motivated me is seeing gifted people become whole, to flourish and to prosper. So over the last 14 or so years, what has blessed me the most is the thousands of gifted people that has also maintained their sanity and their safety and has tapped into their peace for a future. All Nations Atlanta became a thing actually probably about 8 years before it was a thing. I received a prophetic word probably the second month of All Nations Chicago's existence, and in the word, our ministry trajectory was prophesied. They declared a lot of what we would do, what we would be, and at the close of the word, part of what the woman of God ministered was that we would start to open a church, and the first of our church plantings would be in Atlanta. She went on to say that one of my assignments was to be like David, and that I would raise up temples around the world for God, and she said it would begin and be born in Atlanta. So it became a thing then. I'd always known that when we would give birth to other churches, Georgia would probably be the first place that it started. And so by the time we gave birth, it was just a matter of the right grace and the right place. Pastor Bryant carried a strong value system for ethical leadership and for very powerful preaching leadership. And he is probably one of the most teachable men I've ever met in my life. And his wife, even though she's cautious, is extremely courageous. Once she is convinced that something is of the Lord, she gives her full commitment to it, which is the reason and the premise for her caution to begin with, is because when she's in, she's all the way in and doesn't know how to be in and out at the same time. And so I've just kind of learned as their leader to steer those complexities and to push them as best I can.
You're going to know what it is to carry a people in you. Not just on you, not just around you, but the power of a paternal birthing is coming upon your life.
So what was it in you that even before we got installed in a church in the middle of nowhere, put people you had never met on your heart?
So it's not uncommon for me. Sometimes I get burdened by what I think is random people, but it's not. And then what I learned about God is that I kind of see myself as like a first responder. So if there is any type of emergency or pending crisis or pending disaster, somehow, some way, my spidey senses go off. And I remember looking at a picture of all these guys in this black suit, and Melvin told me he was in Arizona. I'm like, for what? He's like, well, LeBron's getting installed in the oldest Baptist church in Arizona. I said, he's about to kill himself. Tell him, don't commit to that. It's not going to last. I said it's going to be hell trying to get him to get vision in that culture. When I met Pastor LeBryant, he was in a very, very unique situation, and humbly speaking, I discerned instantly that the situation he was in that he shouldn't have been in and would not be in, that there was no longevity in the space for it.
When Dr. Matthew Stevenson approached me, I gave him such a stiff arm because I'm like, who is this man that would come and attempt to speak into my life and my future? And I ain't never met him. You know, what type of divination is he using to say that I'm in the wrong spot and I know I'm where God called me to be? I'll be honest with you, I thought you were creepy. I was afraid. Because Melvin gave me the word right before our installation in Arizona. I didn't start talking to you until 2 years after.
Yeah.
I wouldn't release my phone number. I'm like, no, he's crazy.
And Melvin was very apprehensive about telling you. So I made sure I followed up with him several times. Did you tell him what I said? Did you tell him what I said? He was like, I told him.
He ended the statement with, so can I give him your number? And I can't say all the words I said.
Just refused.
But I said, no, thank you.
A strong no.
Just tell him I said, God bless you. Right, a strong no.
If I'm honest, Pastor LeBryant approaches everything in life with a severe amount of caution. I think he gets a great joy of safety out of being able to explore it before he fully commits to it. If that were not worse, I really think Pastor Fanica is much worse than he is when it comes to caution and when it comes to people and even when it comes to risk.
Now, looking back and where we are now is just a trust in our own community.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, you know, just for some past things, it was just like, oh, no. You know, just in the sense of trusting people. So I think for me, I was just like, I don't know.
We're almost at the end of Fanica's timeline. Because when we moved to Arizona, the day we got off the plane, Fanica said, I'm going to give you 5 years. Like, I'm not going to live here a day beyond 5 years. So we were like, we're coming up on 4. And I guess subconsciously, because I didn't even think about it, but subconsciously we were like 4 and some months.
Pastor LeBryant and I, we ended up senior pastoring for 5 years in Tucson, Arizona. And listen, y'all, when I got off that plane and that heat hit me in my face, I said, brother, I only got 5 years of doing this. And what started off almost as a joke was something that I continued to say. I said, I only have about 5 years in me to be in Arizona. When we got there, God began to tell me we were there to heal a people, to love on a people, just to teach them to trust again. But then we got out there and we started to see growth in such a way to maybe we just felt like maybe we should build here. Maybe this is the end all, be all, and this is where the friends are supposed to be. We ended up being in a full-fledged building project. Everything was a goal. We left for a holiday and found out that there was a vote against, and so all of the plans that we had to go forward fell through. The church, everybody was a yes. Yeah. Everything was good, and something happened in a meeting or something we didn't know, and all the yeses turned to no's, and I saw something in him begin to die. And I hadn't seen that part, and I really got I got scared. Yeah. It was something in my husband that I literally saw a change in him. It's like something just began to die in him.
Very honestly, I think that every leader and every pastor will go through this season wondering if I failed, and knowing that I had given and poured everything that I knew how to within a people, feeling like I failed to some degrees because I didn't accomplish everything that was in my heart to fulfill. What I learned out of that was the truth of it was I had over-exaggerated my assignment. I tried to use something that God was using as a mechanism to grow me a permanent residence, and it was never the reason God called me there to begin with. There was almost like a grieving the loss of something that you loved, but knowing it was time to move on.
And God began to bring that 5 years back to me. And he began to bring back to me our purpose of being there. And he said, this is not your end all be all. And after we got back and everything fell through, I knew that it was our time to get out.
But why did it bring you so much joy?
Because I felt like you were stubborn, and I felt like if you were going, even if it was for the sake of not losing stability, I knew it would have to be an extreme circumstance for you to get up out of what you were doing.
And so I remember Apostle calling again, and he said, now will you all let me get you out? And I remember my husband flying to meet him.
And once we actually had our first meeting and interaction, sitting at a table with a man that knew nothing about me but was willing to invest everything he had in me, changed the way that I looked at what it could possibly mean for me to become something outside of what I was.
And so I created room for us to start to relate in such a way where he would trust my wisdom and counsel for the next steps and phases of his life, and for what God would allow him to do in his future. He was willing after he trusted my intent toward he and his family. And so when we started discussions about what was next for him, I had not even given room to think about the possibility of Atlanta until the day before I presented it to him. The night before, in just casual conversation about what was next for him, the possibility of All Nations Atlanta came out, and we started to open up discussions about it, and we felt like it was the right way.
When the opportunity came for us to potentially leave Tucson and to start a new journey in Atlanta, I knew that there was something clear that God was calling myself and my family to, outside of the context that we currently existed in.
And my husband called me and he said, either we're gonna take a ministry over. And I said, babe, nope, that's not it, try again. And he called me back and he said, well, we only have one other option. And I said, what is that? And he said, that's we'll have to start a church. And you know what? Safety City, who always make the safest choices, said, okay, I'll be packed by the time you fly back to Arizona. The whole house will be packed up.
I'll never forget getting back and flying back to Tucson after having the initial meeting in Chicago with Apostle Stevenson and Adrian Davis. Fanika and I had already made our decision that we knew and felt as if this was the will and the wisdom of God for us to make this move and jump. And it was one thing for us to be on one accord and on the same page with it. I was excited, I was fearful, I had all types of emotions even in coming back to Arizona. I had the emotions of having to worry about and being concerned with how do I do this separation and do it the right way with people I've led with and loved for the past 5 years. But even greater than having to share it with leaders who I loved, the challenge was, how am I going to communicate to small children that we're about to make a move to the other side of the country? I'll never forget sitting our girls on the couch in our living room, and we honestly knew that the moment we told them, we would be hit not just with questions, but having to deal with their pains and grief of having to leave something they've always known and become familiar with.
When my parents told us that we were moving to Atlanta, I cried because I didn't want to make new friends, and I just wanted to keep the same friends that I had.
I cried too because all my friends, like best friends, and all my favorite teachers were there, so I kind of felt like I was leaving everybody behind.
I was sad because I didn't want to move to Atlanta because I liked my preschool teacher.
When my parents told me that we were moving to Atlanta, I was very confused and I was very angry because I was so tired of moving to different places and starting over.
As hard as it was for them to transition, I'll never forget Ashriel waking up the next morning and saying, Daddy, I really don't want to go, but Daddy, we trust you. It was in that moment that I knew if I had the trust of a then 5th grader to make a move across the country, if her heart could be equally engaged and equally trusting in this being a God move, was enough for me to say, God, has got to be you, and I'm willing to jump as you call us to do it. I can remember my last Sunday in Tucson, making the announcement, preparing for transition. I remember very clearly saying, you know, the moment that we moved to the East Coast, I've got like 3 days before I have to go to Chicago and preach on one of the biggest stages at that time I'd ever stood on. The night that I preached in Chicago was probably the greatest confirmation that I personally received in this entire journey, because as I stood on that stage and as I communicated what God was saying about us having the keys and our space of access, I felt like I was talking to people that understood what I was saying and wanted to be a part of what I was saying, and I had not felt that level of anticipation or expectation for the word in years, honestly. And so the next day, Apostle made the announcement that it was going to be one nation in 3 locations: Chicago, Huntsville, Alabama, and Atlanta, Georgia. We dropped the flyer in the middle of that service as soon as he made the announcement. And it was the first time for me I received context that church stuff does go viral too.
When that flyer went up, I said, oh my God, this is a real thing. I started seeing people share that thing. I mean, people were emailing me, people were text messaging me, people were messaging me on Instagram, people were messaging me on Facebook.
I really didn't think it was that big of a deal until I saw the storm that happened on it through social media.
And I'm like, wait a minute, this little flyer with my little husband on it, oh my God, this is a real thing. And that's when I realized, like, wait a minute, you know what? This thing might be bigger than what we thought.
Coming up next on Anomaly.
So, okay, so we get past all of the Monday Night Madnesses. That was cute. People came, the Lord moved, God showed up, we made some great relationships. But then the real thing was when we showed up for a Sunday morning.
I'll never forget rolling up to North Springs High School in prayer. I mean, earnest prayer and expectations, and God, just let a few people show up. If just a few people show up that were with us during Monday Night Madness, we'll be okay.
And I tell you, we walked out on that stage and those lights came up and we saw 1 row fill, 2 row, 3. And as the lights began to come up, I said, oh my God, people are actually here.
God showed me on that day that if you trust me, I will always allow success to hit your path.